Hello, my name is Aaron Cavanagh and I'm the founder and editor-in-chief of Post-Burnout.com. Post-Burnout.com is a culture website dedicated to venerating burnt-out artists the world over. This is our website's podcast where we publish full-length recordings of our interviews, which are sometimes the unedited versions of our site's articles and at other times are exclusives. If you're a returning listener, thank you for coming back, and if this is your first time listening, thank you for checking us out. We hope you enjoy and consider subscribing, giving the episodes a thumbs up if you're on YouTube, or giving it a rating if you're anywhere else. It really helps us out. Thank you. Alright, in this edition of PostBurnout.com interviews, the Bristol rocker Gav King discusses a 60-plus-year-old musical career. We also discuss his famous new wave band Private Dicks, which formed in the 70s, and their enduring popularity across Europe and Japan. His recently released solo album Skeletons, working with Tears for Fears and Robbie Williams guitarist Neil Taylor, being the inspiration for Simon Pegg's character Gary King in Edgar Wright's film The World's End, his upcoming album Every Scar Is Mine, and much, much more. Oh, there we go.
There we go. You have to excuse me. I usually get my children to do these things for me.
That's fine, man. Thanks very much for your time. I really appreciate you
Thanks
taking
for
time out.
asking, man. Thanks for asking. I'm, really proud to be doing this.
Well, actually, the first thing I was going to ask, kind of just to kind of establish, is, you know, obviously you've been doing music now for almost like half a century at this point. It's insane. What kind of
Actually, it's 65 years.
what kind of keeps you motivated to kind of keep going?
Well, I'd say probably the fact that I need something to get me through the day.
Yeah.
I've been divorced now for getting on for 15 years, and I live alone now, except with my cat, who has ruptured her cruciate ligament. Can you believe this? She won't be able to play in the Euros this summer. Anyway, so basically, it's something that I live in an area of Bristol that the friends I used to know when I lived here back in the 70s into the 80s have all disappeared somewhere and whatever. So I just find that getting up with perhaps a song that I've started the day before, and I wake up and I think, oh, I wonder what that sounds like. So I go in, I log on, and it's usually I'm sat in the nip. Get a couple of hours in, and I think, oh shit, I ought to put some bloody clothes on. That's basically how these things go on. Sometimes I bring the song up and I think, God, that's shite. Sometimes I think, there might be something in this, but invariably it changes into something else.
Yeah.
And but that is literally how I've just kept going. I mean, the other thing I suppose is with my new wave band, Private Dicks, is the fact that I'm 10 years older than those guys. So we've garnered quite a bit of interest, I suppose, and press through this solo thing that I've done. And I mean, to the extent that we did a 10-date UK tour back in February. We've been asked to do the Blackpool Rebellion Punk Festival, even though we're not punks.
Yeah.
Although, well, actually, I say that I wasn't a punk. I was a fellow traveller. But the rest of the guys were 10 years younger than me, so they were very punk driven. So in that situation, them being 10 years younger and us getting people wanting to see us and people offering us bloody gigs, for God's sake, which we never expected. I keep turning around and saying, no, I'm too old. And they're going, well, we're not.
Yeah.
If you don't do it, we can't do it. So it's sort of emotional blackmail, basically.
Yeah.
It's gratifying to think that something that you did 45 years ago, and we've already had, if you like, one renaissance, and now we're having a second one. I know.
Yeah.
I'll what are they called? Renaissances? I
Renaissance, yeah.
Rural is, but it's because I said back in 2013 when we recorded our live album at the Wild at Heart in Berlin, I said at that time that well, that's it, you know, no more boys, nothing will happen. So we had a general booze up, as the band is renowned for, or as you guys would say, a crack. And we had a bloody good crack, trust me. And then, everything sort of, you just get through, you just going day to day. The boys are still working. One of them's very high up with BT. Another one's a post-production engineer who works on a lot of TV programs and has just finished working with Warner Brothers. And the drummer is one of the most talented people I think I've ever come across, as who can't read or write. I mean, the guy left school without learning anything, turned up at a building site and just said to him, "Give us a job." So they took him on. And it turns out he's just an absolutely brilliant carpenter, woodworker. And he's taken that to another level. And as the world has gone through about buying properties and doing them up, well, he's become a multimillionaire, the little git. So they've all been successful except me. And so what I thought was I'd better do a bloody solo album to see if I can actually get any kudos that they'll keep speaking to me, because I'm a waste really compared to them.
But you're the front man, so you.
Absolutely. Better remember that.
Actually, I mean, like, if I'm correct, like, obviously, when the Private Dicks ended, like, you were married for 30 odd years, and kind of in between that time, between like the Dicks ending and your reformation in the 2000s, when I believe it was based on interest from a Japanese label who wanted to release some of your material in Japan.
Yeah.
Um, I was wondering, do you find like now it's kind of like making up for lost time, or were you kind of doing stuff in between that period?
Well, I mean, once the Dicks split up, I was incredibly disillusioned with the music business, and I'd met this woman who I fell deeply in love with, and we were having a great time, and I was really turning down a lot of offers at that point, perhaps to do other things, because I just wanted to get out of the business. So then when we got married, about a year in, she sort of said to me, "I really think you ought to get back into doing some music." And I said, "What's that?" She said, "Because you're a pain to bleed and live with." Oh, okay. And as it happened, a band in Bath actually were doing a video for a song, and they needed a front man to do it. And they asked a mutual friend who put them in touch with me, and I said, "Yeah, okay, I'll do that." And once we had done that, they were called Distant Cousins, not to be confused with the very big band called Distant Cousins. And then once that was done, they asked me if I'd be interested in joining them. And long story short, I ended up getting them onto TV, and then we got offered a record deal with Magnet Records. And that all seemed to be going really, really well. And then, unfortunately, the guy that actually signed us to Magnet had a rather strange habit and got fired. And the rest of his bands were let go.
Oh,
So
no.
that sort of finished that band up. Then I joined a friend of Roland Orzabal from Tears for Fears. He was a German lad who'd come over here, and he was doing some songs with a computer kiddie. And this was 1985, and this guy on computer had one of the first samplers in the UK. and was doing amazing things with snippets of films from French film noir and stuff like that. I mean, it was really quite out there. Unfortunately, the stuff he was doing and me being a 3-minute verse, chorus,
Yeah.
and exit, it became a little bit confused. But we got courted by a lot of labels, but nothing really came through. And at that point, I said to them, "Look, my wife is now expecting our first child. I'm 35. You're only in your mid-20s." Again, it was this 10-year difference again.
Mhm.
And I said, basically, I think the thing that's holding us back is me, because whereas I still look pretty good and whatever, the record companies know that I'm older than I appear to be. And they probably, that's what's holding them back. What you need is to have a big-breasted blonde lady with long legs, high heels, hair down to here, and you'll get a deal. And they weren't particularly happy about this, but I said, "Look, I'll go and find someone for you." And actually, I found her living next door to Private Dick's bass player. I had to remind. So I got this girl, introduced them, and sure enough, they got offered an advance of $1.5 million. So, that's the mid-80s. So at that
Yeah.
point, I think, well, okay, that's it. So my wife at that point said to me, "So what are you going to do now?" And I said, I really don't know. She said, "What?" At that time, we were just about to have our first child and whatever. So it's quite an exciting time. And I've been doing the family history and having a lot to do with record offices in the UK. And I really wanted to become an archivist. And she said, "Well, if you want that, you need a history degree, so you better go and get one."
Yeah.
So I went off to Cardiff University and did 3 years, got a 2-1, which I was amazed at, considering I was told from my secondary school that I would never amount to anything, which they were almost right. So I went and did that, but then ended up in the family business because of things that actually happened, and I was there for about 10 years. And so all of that time, from basically 86, 87 to the advent of broadband,
Yeah.
were totally, I was still in touch with the boys from Private Dick's. We still saw each other a lot. We're godparents to each other's children. And then out of the blue came this thing from this guy in Japan,
Yeah.
which I ring the boys up and they, ooh. At the same time, Simon Edwards, who is the guy who's resurrected Heartbeat Records that
Mhm.
Private Dick's were on, he's the guy that resurrected it now to put my album out. And he at that point decided to put Avon Calling, which was a very famous compilation album. John Peel loved it. And he decided to put it out on vinyl. And he got in touch with me and said, "Of all the bands that are on it," he said, "I reckon you guys are the only ones that are still talking to each other. Would you play the album launch?" So I got in touch with the boys and they said, "Well, if we have a couple of rehearsals, we'll see." I think, those songs, it's like riding a bike. Almost immediately you're there and you know what they are. So we did that launch for him, and that sort of coincided with this guy from Japan. And he wanted to put the single out, so he put that out, and he sold 5,000 copies of that. And then, so that's when he got in touch and said, "Can I put your album out?" I said, "Yeah, of course." So I had to ring the guitarist up and say, "That album we never made?" I said, "We're just about to." So I told him, and he went, "Can we get away with that?" And I said, "Yeah, it's our album." So bless his heart, Paul Guyver, who's the nicest chap you'll ever meet, he put it all together, and we sent it to Japan, and he put it out on CD, and it sold 5,000 copies.
Mhm.
And then at the same time, these young kids from Europe, because of broadband again, as I said, I was starting to see the band name striking up in places and thinking, wow, this is odd. We haven't actually been forgotten. And that was a beautiful moment because you do something in 1979, it lasts for 12 months,
Yeah.
and you think that's it. I mean, we were really proud of what we did. Um, I know that we were very close to being contenders, but like most all 99% of these stories, it just ends in failure. And then to have this come back and think, good God, there are people there who actually like us all this time later. And they
Yeah.
were young kids. And that's how we ended up going to France. And then we ended up going to Germany. And it culminated in playing the Road to Ruin festival in Rome,
Mhm.
where we were second on the bill to Brian James from The Damned, and he had Sham 69 backing him.
Okay.
And it was a 3-day festival, and we were second on the bill. Couldn't believe this.
Yeah.
So that, interestingly, at that point, Neil Taylor, who had been playing with Tears for Fears and Robbie Williams for the last 10 years,
Mhm.
he heard that we were playing and he rang me up and said, can I come and play with you? It'd be fun. And I said, yeah, okay. So he came over to Rome for that weekend. And apparently whilst we were doing our sound check, one of the guys from Sham 69 said to Brian James, they've brought a ringer in. He said, what do you mean? He said, they're only a four-piece. I said, fine. He said, I know who that guy is. He said, he said, that's Robbie Williams' guitarist. And he said, what? He said, we're not following them. Go and tell the promoter we're going on before them.
Yeah.
And that's what he did. And so they went on. We thought, well, that's it. The crowd will go because there were about 2,000 people there. Um, and I can remember vividly Neil saying to me, well, that's it then. I've stayed sober all this time. I'm going to go off and get pissed. And we all looked at each other and said, yeah, we might as well join you. So we went to the bar and essentially got shit-faced, expecting to come out on stage and there'd be nobody there.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether you've seen the documentary that we actually did about the band. It's called Exiles in Neverland, and it's on YouTube. It's a half an hour, and there's film in there of Neil just as we're going on, and he says to me, "I tell you what, I'll go on first, and I'll do some crazy guitar work." Yeah, yeah, all right, Neil. And for about 10 seconds while you guys walk on, and we'll go straight into the first number. Well, he goes on, but of course he's so pissed and he gets so carried away. He's lying on his back, kicking his legs in the air, doing this crazy stuff. You can see it on camera. I'm stood behind him going, "You fucking wanker." And I've got a bottle of beer in my hand. Anyway, we all walk on. We kick him, get him up, and then we all go into the first song, and we all started in the wrong place.
Yeah.
And it's chaos, absolute bloody chaos. We heard later that the promoter had his head in his hands and he's going, "Oh, it's another disaster." And we finished that one and we just all looked at it, go on, do the next one. And we went straight into the next number and it just took off.
Yep.
We got to the first chorus of the second song and the audience started singing the chorus. And I'm not kidding. I was blown away, just couldn't believe it. To actually, God knows what Robin Williams must feel like when he's there every night and they're singing, he just stands with his mic out. And I thought, I can do that. So I was just holding people singing my words back at me.
Yeah.
So that was really was something else. And then it slowly started sort of slowing down. But then we decided to do a new single, and that lifted things back up again.
Yep.
And really proud of that single. I mean, it got some very good reviews, and somebody was saying, one of them I remember saying something about this could have been recorded in 1979. It sounds just like they did back then. Um, But, and I'm sure this record will not change the world. But then the band wouldn't want to change the bloody world. They're quite happy doing what they're doing. And he said, and I recommend having a barbecue, having a load of beer, put this song on because you can all dance and have fun. And
Yeah.
we thought, oh, great. And then we got asked to go back to Berlin again. And that's when we decided to record live there. Um, and that was to celebrate the launch of the single. So that was called Exile in Neverland. And that was a song about Phil Spector because he was in jail at the time. So we put on the album. There's a picture of me with Phil, one of Phil Spector's bloody wigs on, that really heavy curly one. It's frightening. Um, so it was. Then it was that point we did that, and we said, right, okay, that's it, really. And it was only because of the lockdown with COVID that we even considered looking at that recording again, because the guy, the engineer, had buggered something up in it, and he recorded the whole thing, but most of the vocals were missing. There was something messed up in the middle, and they gave us our money back. And I'm just talking to Givey, the guitarist, and saying, well, what we're going to do? We're all locked down. And I said, what about that live stuff that we had? And he said, no, it's bloody awful. It's, can't do it. And I said, well, can I have a listen to it? I said, there's one track, I think, on there.
Yeah.
And he went off and he came back a couple of days later and said, I think I found one track. I said, great. He said, I'll send it up to you. So we listened to it and said, yeah, it sounds great. He said, I've got to put the vocals on though. So how are we going to do that? And he said, well, I'm going to send you a little box and a really good SP57 Shure mic. And I'll show you how to set it up. And then you'll do the vocals in your flat in Bristol while I'm down here.
Yeah.
And I said, but these songs, I said, it's 40 odd years later. I've got to sing at that level. Can't we take them down again? And he went, no, can't. And I said, oh, great. He said, oh, it'll be all right. You'll do it. And so we did that first one. And then he came back while we were doing that. And he said, I think I found another one. And in the end, he went through the whole lot and rescued it. And we had the live at the Wild at Heart Berlin. And we put it out on vinyl, as you do. and we didn't sell any. But it was great to have it there as something to do. And we started giving it away at gigs to people. And it was fantastic. So that's sort of where we got to, and we thought that was that. And then all of a sudden, this promoter down in Kent, of all places, started to ask us to do some gigs for him. And then he came up with this UK tour thing. And then the guy from the Rebellion Festival saw us at one of those gigs. And that's when he put us on the bill for this time. So there's me saying this summer is the end of Private Dicks, especially as I've got my second solo album to do, which is going to be coming up, which is going to be called Every Scar Is Mine. And basically, I'm saying to them, well, that's it, guys. But I know for a fact they're going to turn around if something gets offered, because I know the guy, the promoter, we were saying to him, he always wanted to play New York. And the first thing he said was, leave it with me.
Okay.
So we don't know. I mean, it's been mentioned before. It may never happen. But we have probably 50 or 60 people in the States now. I don't know, it's a big country. But a lot of them are in New York, and they would love us to go over there. So would I. But thank God for my money from my divorce. That's all I can say.
There's a lot of avenues to go there. I guess one thing I'd ask you were kind of mentioned about the kind of popularity you had in Japan and in mainland Europe that you're kind of kind of not really expecting. And one thing that I think is interesting now in terms of the digital age is how you can kind of compare it to when, say, the Private Dicks was around. Because back then I don't know if your records were actually being distributed there or if they were just brought on import. But now you can just kind of put stuff
Yeah,
online and it's just like available globally. How
no,
do you find that's sorry.
yeah. I mean, I've for this album, Skeletons, I shelled out for a PR lady, and also a radio plugger. And so the radio plugger, bless her heart, her name is Catherine. Anybody wants me to put in touch with her, just get in touch with me, because she actually has done a really good job. I swear she must have got my radio plays for the single profiled into the three figures. I've last week, DistroKid is the site
Sure.
that distribute through, and they monitor it. And they came up and said, "Hey, this radio station in New York have been playing your single." Well, to get into the States to do that, and then next thing I know, there's this guy in Australia, in Queensland, who's playing it. So you're right. All these different things as it actually goes around, and whilst I didn't do the album for any other reason than to demonstrate really what Paul Guyver from Private Dick said, that he wanted to ensure that that when I die, which isn't going to be long by now, I mean, I'm an old guy, I can't go on much longer.
Yeah.
Hey?
I don't have to respond to that.
Yeah, we laugh and dance into the oblivion.
Yeah.
He basically said, "Look, people just think you've always just been this raucous rock singer," and he says, "And I know you've got this other side to you, where you're a decent vocalist and you've got really good songs. And you've been talking about doing this album for quite a while. Let's do it." And it was him who sort of got me together with an acoustic guitar to sort of just to get the voice down. And I think what he did it for, he thought, well, if the old bastard dies, at least I'll have those recordings and I can do something with them.
Sure.
And anyway,
You're so cynical. No, I'm joking.
well, you know what? I've actually done this myself. With Neil Taylor from Robbie Williams, who
Yeah.
produced my solo album. I was over with him this week, and he said to me, he rang me. I was supposed to be going over Tuesday, and something happened, and then he rang me Wednesday morning, and he said, "Right, I've got today free, as it turns out now. So get your ass over here. Let's put those vocals down on these last few songs before you die." I said, "Absolutely, okay." And it's that feeling of, well, if a super fan comes up and shoots me, then at least then it then at least they've got the vocals there and they can do
We'll
what.
have metal detectors at Rebellion this year.
Absolutely. I mean, I look at it this way, it could be the way to sell records. I don't know. I'm thinking perhaps chopping an ear off might do it, but it didn't work for Van Gogh, so it worked for me. But it was that getting those things down, and then Paul managed to. He's got a lot of friends where he lives, some very very good musicians, and we had this song called "I Really Care," which we wrote back in 2000. When the Chicks were having a little, should we get the band back together bit?
Yeah.
So okay, and then Paul said, "Well, I got this together," and he got a string bass on it, and it was basically, it sounds like a late night sort of jazz thing. It's got string bass, it's got a lovely cornet solo on it and stuff like that, and it's great. Now Neil Taylor heard it, and he said, "Do you think I could have a go at producing that?" And we said, "Yeah, fine." So we sent the stems to him to his place, and he turned it into a sort of, I'd say, a version of Stairway to Heaven, actually, in a way, because right at the end you got this solo that comes out of bloody nowhere, and it's just awesome. I mean, it really is a very very good thing. So we got these two versions, and Paul and I were supposed to be recording my solo, the album last September, and he got this big job in with Warner Brothers, and he didn't know how to tell me because, and I mean, I could just said, that's fine, let's just wait. And I think he thought, no, you'll probably die at some point. And I'm not. So he got in touch with Neil Taylor and said, would you take over production duties? And Neil said, well, okay, well, tell him to send some songs over and I'll see what we can do. So the first song I sent him was off the album it's called Blood and Blues. And the reason I wrote these songs was because I'm looking back on, I've got to the age where you look back. Trust me, when you get there, you're going to look back and a lot of that looking back is you're thinking, Jesus Christ, did I do that?
Yeah.
Oh my God. I mean, and I've actually managed to apologize to some people. I mean, when I was in my 20s, I was an arsehole.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there were a number of young ladies that I had to go and say, look, I'm sorry, I was a complete dick and please forgive me. I mean, the problem for my ex-wife, of course, it took her 30 years to find that out, but hey, so things. So people had asked me to put my stories down in a book, and I said, well, I'm not that kind of writer. I'm a lyric writer, and that's what I do. And then I started to think of this looking back and thinking of different bits. And I thought, if I put it in an album, then people can listen to that and think, oh, I wonder if that's about me or if that's about me. And essentially, up we go. My cat.
I thought you just had appendicitis.
You're right, darling. She's just...
Sorry to interrupt you, but I was thinking, like, didn't you mention before that you and your son had attempted to, with your son ghostwriting, attempted to do an autobiography, but kind of abandoned it?
Well, we did, yes, because he kept saying to him, look, I'm a bloody journalist. I can ghostwrite your life. And he said, so why don't we go away for a week?
Yeah.
And I said, yeah, okay, over there, sweetie. And I said, yeah, okay. So we booked a cottage down on the Gower coast in Wales. And he made the mistake of bringing a lot of Jim Beam down.
Okay.
And one thing led to another. And basically, we were across the road from a really nice pub as well. And in the end, we never really got around to it. Things, and he still says, no, we could still do it. And I'm going, I don't think so. No,
Yeah.
I've done the album and that's it, mate.
Were you like, there's probably some things you don't want to know.
Well, actually, he knows most of it.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, he's my child from another mother.
Mm-hmm.
And he's bloody hell, he's turned 50 last year. So, I mean, I've got a 50-year-old son, and I just think, Jesus Christ, I can remember turning 50 myself and thinking, this is hell.
Yeah.
And this poor bugger did this. So that we're more like mates than, say, father and son, because I know that, say, with my 3 children with my wife, there is the father-child relationship. With him, it's more like we're mates, just apart. And he was a stand-up comic for a long while.
Okay.
And he was very good, actually, very good. But he's still occasionally he's sort of saying, Private Dick's next album. I'm going, yeah, well, we could do. And he said, how many times have you bloody said that? And he's actually a Liverpool fan. Right, okay. I'm a Man U fan for my sins. Guitarist is a Liverpool fan. Our bass player's Man United. The drummer is Chelsea. But my son got a crowd of people that go up to Liverpool to go and watch them. And before they used to go in, they used to play the Private Dick's album.
Oh, really?
Went in because one day they went up there and they were listening to it as they got to the ground, and they went in and they had a fantastic win. So every time they go now, they have to listen to the album before they go in there.
So you're responsible for any Liverpool wins.
That's right. Yeah. Damn right.
You were mentioned there kind of like talking about like how you write songs now as in kind of like as being more reflective and obviously being the kind of more sort of earnest and kind of like emotionally vulnerable. I mean, obviously you mentioned there your new album is going to be called These Scars Are Mine.
Yeah.
It's kind of like it's based on like you know, no matter what happens in life, you have kind of these scars that just kind of like you know are signifiers that you've lived a life. You know.
Absolutely. They
Yeah.
define you. Precisely. That was I was watching a program on the emigrants going into Ellis Island in New
Mhm.
York, and I remember seeing the black and white film, and they went up to the um, Statue of Liberty,
Yeah.
and then you see them coming off, old ladies in shawls carrying babies, some dapper old gentleman with just a suitcase, and I was just watching that and just thinking, wow. And I know that so many of them went in there, and they were, because they couldn't speak English, they were given a name.
Yeah.
And I thought the to actually go into a country like that, and now when we know what they faced, to be going in there and to be given a name and everything else. And I thought the only thing they've got are uh, their memories are of what their life was before, what it was like. And then it sort of hit me that, yeah, that's exactly what I'm in that way thinking about it. I'm not saying for it in any way that my solitary life now is anything as bad as what they had. But it did lead me to sort of think, well, yeah, well, of course, these things actually define me, these different things that I did, which of course led to Profiled, which was the single that's been out for the last 4 weeks. Um, when I found out that that was actually based on me, it's
Simon Pegg in The World's End.
those films. It's I at the time I thought, no, this doesn't happen to people, but of course it does. You take your inspiration from wherever you can. I mean, I've noticed now that I've had to put on skeletons 2 or 3 things underneath to say thank you for the inspiration to people,
Yeah.
because I've nicked something from them. But as they say, forget the rest, steal from the best.
Yeah.
And I remember watching David Bowie talk about this, and he was saying the same. He said, "Well, of course you're going to use things that you've heard, because that's how you grow and that's how you develop, and you take in the things you love." I mean, at 13 or 14, I heard Joni Mitchell's Clouds album. I can remember selling my fishing gear for 7.6 at this tire place that did swap things.
Yeah.
The guy said to me, I'll take the fishing gear, but you can have one vinyl album and that's it. So I was going through them and they were all bloody rubbish, but there were 2 in the end. And one was Gummer by Pink Floyd, and the other was Clouds by Joni Mitchell. And Gummer was a double album, I seem to remember. And I thought that's better value for money. But then I thought, no, 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 I'll go with Joni Mitchell. So it was like a sliding doors moment. I
Yeah.
could have ended up a really heavy prog fan. As it was, I went with a singer-songwriter. And that's really where a lot of my inspiration came from, that singer-songwriter period with Carole King, James Taylor, Joni Mitchell, and that sort of period of the early 70s. Joni Mitchell then, of course, grew up towards the end of her 20s, which I was having this conversation with somebody recently about Taylor,
Mhm.
Taylor
Taylor
Swift.
Swift.
Yeah. Um, and she was saying this friend of mine had been listening to the album, and she said, I'm just thinking, is all these songs about breakups and everything else, isn't she a bit old for this now? And we
Mhm.
were discussing it, and I said, well, actually, Joni Mitchell got to about her late 20s, and suddenly she was in a stable relationship. I think that she she decided to, when she was in that relationship, she started seeing different things.
Hmm.
So when you're young, you tend to write people then these things that are happening. And I've found for myself that I tend to now, on the Skeletons album, um, there's one that I looked at, um, just seeing a line and thinking, wow, that's amazing, um, and writing it down and then transposing that, if you like, into my life. And I mean, one of them is on the album. It's on the follow-up album. Is I think well, I can't remember now. Is thanks to H.G. Wells and Mr. Kipps, because actually I saw this bit when he said, um, he suddenly comes into money, the character, and he's forced to marry this woman in society when he's madly in love with a shop girl.
Yeah.
And I looked at it and thought, yeah, that's you, isn't it? And I saw this bit and I thought, yeah, that actually, and it's, or if I'm watching, if I'm like I did with Every Scar Is Mine, you're watching something and you just hear a phrase or a word, and I've always have a pad by the side of me, so I just write it down, and it will
Yeah.
stay there. And then it can be one drunken night about 3 weeks later that I suddenly come out and think, wow. But it was like profiled. It was 1 in the morning, and I got up to take a leak, as you do.
Hmm.
Um, you haven't got that yet.
Oh,
You
no, I have.
already? Good God, you poor man. And I got up to do that, and I had the word profiled was in my head, and I was a little puzzled for it. I stood in the, and I thought, oh, of course, it's the Simon Pegg thing, and as I'm stood there splashing away, and I'm thinking, oh, and this first line came into my head. So I walked into my lounge where I am now and wrote that down. And the next thing I knew, 20 minutes later, the whole song was written down. I went back to bed, woke up in the morning and thought, well, God, what rubbish was that I was writing?
Yeah.
And I looked at it and thought, actually, that's pretty bloody good. And of course, and when the record company heard it and when Neil Taylor heard it, they sort of said, that's something to hang the bloody album on. Come on, it's a great tale.
Yeah.
But having said that, not too many people are interested, really.
All right.
Yeah, we did get somebody who got in touch with Simon Pegg's management company or PR company, and told him this story and said, and there's songs on this album, and they wrote back and they said, "Oh yeah, really? Well, ask him what was the village, what was the name of the copper that Simon stayed with, what's the name of the pub in that village."
Because
So
he was doing, for Huffles, he was doing prep for that, wasn't it?
yeah, and he
I say,
sent
man.
they sent it back to him, and we never heard of them again.
Oh, really? I like that you just verify everything and just like,
It's just, but I said that I people said to me, "Well, was I pissed off about it? What was my feeling?" And I think what I wrote about was the um, dichotomy or the opposing emotions you get. On the one hand, thinking, well, my life, yeah. On the other hand, you're making me look like a complete jerk, you bastard.
yeah.
And I was a bit like that all the way through until I heard him being interviewed, and people were asking him if he was going to do a fourth part of the trilogy. And he said, no, I don't think that's going to happen. They were talking to him and said, well, who's your favorite character out of all the three films? And he said, well, there's a lot and all that. He said, but I've really got a soft place for Gary King.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, he said, because through it all, yeah, he's a man child. Yeah, he's arrested development writ big. But all in all, he's a good bloke. He's a nice chap. Thought, oh, all right then. Let you off.
And then someday he'll write his autobiography and it would say, yeah, I did rip it off.
Yeah, but it's all right because he's been dead 20 years.
You'll be vindicated from beyond the grave,
Mm, great idea.
I guess one final thing I'll ask you is yeah, you were kind of mentioned that, like, you just released your album Skeletons in March. You're already working on a second record. I mean, how do you find kind of writing now is different from when you were in Private Dicks? Because I mean, obviously then you had the full band set up. Now are you working with a singular band? Are you working with session musicians? How's the dynamic work for your solo
Well,
career?
for the majority of it, I mean, this sounds silly because I had the guy that mastered my album, um, and I have to say, before this, I really didn't quite understand about mastering. I could, I'd see albums being re-released, and they say remixed and remastered, and I think, does it make that much bloody difference?
Yeah.
What? And and then this guy, I worked with him back in the 80s when I was in this band, Distant Cousins, actually. He was the engineer. And I found out that he only lives just down the road from me. And he came to see Private Dicks when we played a gig about 18 months ago. And it reintroduced himself to me. And I went, bloody hell, So and that's how we found out we lived near each other. And he said, oh, I'll pop round, we'll go out for a beer. And then he told me he was mastering and what he was doing. And when we sent the first one, now Neil Taylor was doing all the mastering because he's the engineer, he's the producer, and he was doing the mastering. And I said to him, "Well, shall we send it over to Steve?" And he said, "Well, we could do just see what the difference is like." So we sent the track over to him, and it came back. Neil listened to it once, and he said, "I'm never mastering another track again." And I said, "Why?" And he said, he knows what he's doing. I thought I knew what I was doing, but I'm just playing with it. And I said, well, you've played basically all the instruments on my album. And I said, so if we got somebody else who's as good as you are doing that, it really makes a difference. And my God, it really does. So from that point of view, Neil, I write the songs here, and I use a very, very old uh, system. It's called Dance EJ. Now, it's basically for idiots who can't do Cakewalk or Ableton or anything like that. It's for 12-year-old kids who
Yeah.
can write a song quite quickly. There's some samples, and you put them in. And I got back into, I was thinking, well, how am I going to get these songs down? Because normally I'd sit with Paul from the Dicks, and I'd sing the song to him, and he'd work out where the chords were. And then I'd take him into the middle eight and the chorus. And that's how all the Dicks stuff was done. With this, I'd start off either with working out what I like as a drum beat, or two or three bass lines, and get them clashing, and then finding a root note that appears, and then writing a song about that. And it takes maybe, sometimes it can take a morning, sometimes it takes 2 or 3 days. Sometimes I go back to it after 2 or 3 days and I change the whole bloody thing.
Yeah.
But at some point, I end up with this instrumental track, and at that point, I've got all my lyrics and everything are around me. I've got thousands of books filled with it. So I just plow through and find ones I haven't used yet and think,
Yeah.
oh, would that work? And I press play and it goes in. I start. So I then say to Neil, look, I've got this track. I'll send the stems over to you. And that itself is a pain in the ass because I have to do it stem by stem, and it goes through. Everyone takes me about 5 minutes, and I hate doing it. But it gets over to Neil. Neil listens to it, puts it into his system, and then changes it completely, basically. And then I hear it and I say, "You've missed the song," and he goes, "Yeah, well, I was thinking about that." And I go, "Well, can we just put that?" And he goes, "Yeah, well, all right, we'll just do." And we go through 7 or 8 mixes, and then basically between us, we arrive at that song that's on the album, which is why I've actually put him down as a songwriter on the album, because I think, to me, this is a bit like, say, I don't know whether you've ever heard Frankie Goes to Hollywood or
Yeah, yeah.
ABC, their demos before Trevor Horn got them. But you listen to it and you think, my God, they make. I thought Frankie Goes to Hollywood. I've heard them playing that, and then can you imagine going in and hearing, and you go, what the? This thing hits you. ABC. I mean, they were great songs,
Yeah.
but Trevor Horn turned it into something genius. And I thought, if Neil's going to do that for me, then he's as much. Yes, I've created the song and I've written the lyrics, but he's made it into something that I can put out and be proud of.
It's interesting because people do think of like production as like, as something that's done after the music, but I mean it really is just an extension of the songwriting arm in a way. It really can just change and totally alter. I mean, it's always interesting because you were talking about mixing and mastering there. Like when you hear a different producer mix a song that you're familiar with, and it could just totally change the mood and the atmosphere. And it's very interesting how like it is still an extension of the songwriting process, I think.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, to be fair, though, it was easy for me to say that because if I was a very successful artist, giving 50% of my song away would make me a complete arsehole. As it is, I knew none of these would make any money, so it was easy to say, I have 50% of this. So, that's no problem. I mean, where I'm going to be really shafted is if ever one of them actually gets hit
Yeah.
somewhere or somebody, from somewhere, and I've died and all my rights have gone to my children back, and they say, "Why's he got 50% of it?" Going, yeah. So I mean, he plays the bass on there. He plays um, all the guitars. He puts the strings on. He comes up with melody lines, and then sends it to me. And then say, so I'm acting rather like an executive producer, so that he's doing this, and I'm saying, now can we do that? Then what we've found is lately we're quite getting into being in the same room together rather than going through these 8 or 9 mixes, because we're bouncing ideas off each other.
Are you living near each other or?
Yeah, he's about half an hour away, that's
Okay,
all.
cool.
So I can, he can ring me up and say, why don't you come over? Well, that's what happened on Wednesday. And the song we were doing is the opening track of the follow-up album, Every Scar Is Mine. And it's a song called Madness, I Know. Now, when I did it, I thought that's a great opener for an album. I'm going to keep that. So I sent it across to him, and he said, "Well, you've got to put the vocals on that." And I said, "Well, there ain't much really. There's one small verse, and then there's this bit, and then there's one small verse, and it bloody ends." And
Yeah.
he went, "Okay." So I went over, and you wouldn't believe this. I mean, I did all the vocals actually in his bedroom. I mean, this people say to me, what studio are you doing these things in? I'm going, well,
The glitz and the
actually,
glamour.
yeah. So for this lot, he just said to me, I want to see what it's like just recording here in the kitchen. So he
Yeah.
just passed me a mic and he put can you hear it? Yeah, right. I played the track, yeah. And I sing it through. And invariably he goes, yeah, that's great. Okay, leave it. I go, "Do you really want to take?" Go, no, it's good, it's fine. So we put it down. So we were there on Wednesday with this track, Madness I Know, and he'd sent me a first mix. And I had these ideas. And we get in there and he starts playing it. And then I sort of said, oh, can we actually, what I want to do is back and back, put the bit. So he goes, yeah. And he goes, copy, took it, paste. 5 minutes, that's done. And then I'm saying to him, I really, I just think one guitar note just holding over that last bit was brilliant. And he goes, oh, hang on. And he switches, bends down, switches it up, gets a 3-3-5 up on his lap. And he's going, yeah, and another one. And he puts it down. And he goes, oh, yeah, that's quite nice. It's quite nice. And we started at 11 o'clock, and at 1 o'clock, we said, well, that's finished. Good, that's great. Let's go to the pub. So to actually work with somebody of that skill and reputation, I'm a very lucky guy. Very lucky guy. But I've literally just written a lyric for him for his new solo album he's going to be doing after the one that's just about to be released. And that was, and that lyric is about the fall of Hitler.
Well, what happened? No, I don't.
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, but it's, yeah, again, it's just that I saw this program about, I think it was the BBC. They did 3 1-hour episodes, the fall of Hitler, the end of Nazism. And in the third one, they're talking about Eva Braun just waiting to be married, and she gets everybody pissed with champagne, and they run out of champagne, but they're still dancing. And I thought, and then they talk about Himmler, who is the architect of the Holocaust. Yeah. And him thinking that if he can actually stay alive, do something good, then the Allies, when they take over, they'll either take Hitler in or kill him or whatever, but he can represent a new Germany. So he actually arranges for 1,000 women and children to be released from Auschwitz. And he thinks that is going to save his neck.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's so delusional that I thought, there's something in that. So I just started, writing some words down before I knew it. And then Neil said to me, I'm doing this song. He said, can you give me some lyrics for it? And I went, actually, I've got this song about the downfall of Hitler. And he went, that's not my sort of thing, yeah.
Actually, I think that's a good indication of kind of people's desperation, when people feel dead to rights like that, the kind of sort of rational thinking. They think like, oh, maybe if I release, 1,000 people, I'll be okay or something,
I mean, I have to say though, that kind of thing has always been, even with the Dicks. We had a song called "You Want It, You Got It," which was going to be the B-side of the second single that we did with Heartbeat Records, and even the boys in the band, years later, I've started talking to them about saying, well, lyrically that makes a lot of sense now, and they're going, what? I said, well, the song is about the time when David Frost went to see Nixon to talk about doing a TV program with him.
Yeah.
And you thinking, this disgraced bloke who lied to a whole nation, who was, I would say, evil personified, but there again, you got Hitler and you got Trump, so that wouldn't be true, but it ain't far off. And
this would have been only a couple of years after Watergate when this song came out.
1978.
Yeah, so only
I wrote this song. Basically, it was the last verse is something. Call London and say it's okay. Just ask them what price they'll pay.
Yeah.
And I thought it was an appalling thing to do, but it was. I've seen the film recently, the documentary that was done of it. Not documentary, the
Frost Nixon
on it. Yeah, fantastic, absolutely fantastic. But I remember being horrified at the time, thinking David Frost was almost this sort of icon, and there he is, basically giving this crook a load of money. So I was writing about that. Then actually, there's me saying all the Dick songs that are about relationships and everything. There was another one called 5-Star Freezing, which at the time, most fridges at that time were 4-star. They meant you had 2, 3, and 4, and the 4 stars were the best ones. So that meant that 5-star to me was cryogenics.
This was your song about Disney.
Precisely, because when I thought, of course, Walt Disney had his head cut off and frozen so that when the time came for robotics, they could put his brain inside a bloody robot, and we all thought, what a madman.
Yeah.
But so the song is actually all about, and 5-star. Going on the rocks today, going on the rocks today, 5-star me, down, 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 down. So I'm writing bizarre stuff like that, and people are going, it's about what?
You're
So
like, trust me, it's really big in Japan.
just like the band.
Yeah. Actually, did you ever hear the theory that the movie Frozen, which was released about 10 years ago, was created just so if people Googled Disney Frozen, that would come up instead of
No.
yeah. That's a theory.
I tell you what I saw the other day was that there's some scandal about Nickelodeon.
Oh
That's
yeah, yeah. Quite on set.
I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, the guy was really aimed the filth at the parents. So the
Yeah.
kids were being asked to do an awful lot of what they saw as innocent things, and this guy was doing, Jesus.
It reminds me of like the Jimmy Savile thing, it's just like it's just people need to be vetted if they're going to be working with children.
Yeah. Well, actually, Paul, the guitarist from the Dips, when that came out, he actually said to me, "And the next one's going to be Rolf Harris."
Yeah.
And I said, "Really? Why's that?" And he said, "Oh, they're warned." He said, "I've been in studios with him in there, and the producers will not leave any women alone with him in a studio because they know what he's like. He's just absolutely appalling." And of course, John Lydon knew about it in
Yeah.
1980. 1982, the Stones were touring Europe, and I managed to get on the support staff. I was basically just a gopher.
Mm.
I worked with them when they were at Roundhay Park in Leeds, so that would have been July 82. And the guy who was the site manager was actually social sec at Leeds University at the time, and that was Andy Kershaw.
Okay.
So he became, Andy
Yeah.
Kershaw.
Yeah.
Uh, but I remember just popping into him and I said, "Here, Andy, Jimmy Savile's just walking up the lane. He's trying to come into the site." And he said, "He can fuck off." I saw him go down there and he just pointing to him saying, "Yeah." And I said to him, "Fucking hell, that was a bit much. What was that about, mate?" And he said, "I'm not having that fucking nonce on my site." That was 82.
Yeah.
They all fucking knew.
I know.
Yeah, I mean, it's oh god, it's a sick old world, actually.
There was I was watching the dramatization with Steve Coogan, and I was just like, it's so disgusting. I couldn't like
Well,
finish it.
I couldn't actually watch it.
Yeah, it was so bad.
That's why I thought it's going
But
to.
like you kind of need to be told the reality of it, but at the same time, it's very hard to swallow too.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, also to the extent that I heard something about Gary Glitter, because of course
Yeah.
Glitter took his computer literally to the PC World, which is only 2 or 3 miles away from me,
Mhm.
and um, and all that time, even when he got done and everything else, and I'm thinking about, well, they were girls of 13 or 14, and we all know that they can look so much older and everything else. And I'm wondering, was it just because then, of course, you go back to Bill Wyman and with Mandy, and
Yeah.
then, of course, his son Stephen going out with her mother.
Mm.
Witness that.
I
So
know.
all of that going on, and of course, Jimmy Page and Led Zeppelin, what they got away with.
Yeah, yeah.
But with glitter, with glitter, I saw something in the last week or so where somebody was talking about the charges he faced to get with his actions against a 7-year-old girl. And
Jesus
I
Christ.
suddenly thought, fucking hell.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just a mistaken thing with girls that look older. It was that perverted again. That's horrible. Bloody horrible. And of course, the bastard is still in jail, isn't he?
Yeah.
So I hope he rots in hell in there.
At least, some unlike Savile, at least get some justice, I guess.
Mind you, there again, the Magdalena girls in your area.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
what's the film called? With
The Magdalene sisters.
yeah, God. Have you heard the Joni Mitchell song?
About it, yeah.
Yeah, fucking hell. I mean, that that blew me away, that film. Really.
I think also, kind of years later vindicated Sinead O'Connor. Remember when she was on Saturday Night Live?
Yeah,
So
I know.
I
Yeah.
know. Again, it's one of those things where it's like the harsh kind of realities of life. You kind of need to know about them, but at the same time, it's hard to stomach.
Yeah.
I don't know. On that note,
Don't like cheerful notes.
I guess the final thing I'll ask, just you mentioned Private Dicks are playing Rebellion. Yeah, the album came out. It's doing really well
Yeah.
for you. It's like you said, getting kind of international attention too. What does the rest of 2024 have in store for you?
Well, I suppose, to be honest, it'll just be writing more songs. I mean, I can't. The one thing about it that I love is the fact that when you start to have a blank screen, um, unlike writing, when people get, they're faced with that and they're going, it's the most frightening thing ever. Working with samples, I just find is great because I can just plow through the deepest recesses, find something that I think, oh, that sounds interesting, and drop it up.
Yeah,
And I find something to clash with it, and that goes up. And that starts the whole process of zooming along.
yeah.
And that's
It's kind
not
of
to
like
say,
I have a similar thing with like writing where you get like prompts and then it gives you an idea. It's much
yeah,
easier than just looking at a blank page.
it certainly is. I mean, and I haven't got to go through that appalling situation of where I'm sat with somebody trying to work the chords out, and
Yeah.
I'm screaming at them saying, "No, not that bloody chord!" And they're going, "Which fucking chord do you want?" So if it's just me and the computer, I can scream at myself.
Yeah.
But the amazing thing is that it just takes the day away. Um, I I'd be lost without it. I really would.
Do you
So
find it therapeutic?
yeah,
Yeah.
very, very. And to then be able to send it to Neil and then to go over to Neil and sing it. And he goes, I wasn't expecting that. And then he tries it and then we do it. And then we're satisfied with it. And then we send it to Steve Street to master it. And it comes back 10% better. I
Yeah.
think we're going, "Ooh." So it's, I mean, I think every scar is mine. I've got a feeling I'm going to put that out about the end of November.
Okay.
So that I can just whatever I've built up over this, I can actually just keep that ticking over. Um, and I've got half of the third album written already. So,
Oh well.
what I'm trying not to do on this follow up though is I remember hearing um, the Strangers' first album. I described it as punk for people who don't like punk.
Right.
And it's a fantastic album. I bloody love it. Um, and then the second album came out, and apart from a couple of tracks, it was really disappointing. And I thought, yeah, that's the. I know they talk about the dodgy second album syndrome, but it's often like you've got this bunch of songs that didn't make it onto the first album, so you put those on the second
Yeah,
album.
because back then artists would kind of release 2 albums a year. It was like you had Stranglers did it, Blondie did it, all the
Yeah,
kind of popular artists at the time. In '77, actually, in particular, there was like
they're
The
on.
Damned did it.
And so, how do you write the second album if you're on the bloody road and wanting to
Yeah.
that? So the record company says, well, it's time for the second album. So you say, oh, well, pick through these ones and put it on. I mean,
Yeah.
for me, I'm quite lucky in the extent I had about 3 or 4 songs that I had on Skeletons that I actually then did new, like Profile, for instance. They came on and they said, that's got to be on the album. So I had to pick which one to leave. So one of them that I left off, I put it on the CD as an extra track at the end of it. So then Scars will be mostly stuff I've written since then. But there's going to be a couple of the songs that I've kept, which I would have put on the album, except these others kicked them off. So I'll put those on. But the majority will be new. So I'm trying not to make the mistake that I know everybody else makes. But I'm just bloody lucky. I can't believe, to be honest, I can't believe that I'm 72 this year, for God's sake. And how the fuck does that happen? And I keep looking up above and going, "Are you all right up there?" Over
Have you
me.
forgotten me?
And it's the weirdest thing.
Yeah.
I mean, and amazingly as well in Bristol, um, there are my contemporaries from years ago who perhaps have always been in Bristol now, because I mean I didn't come back till here until 2011, because I was in Spain for a year after the divorce, so I just got out, and they've all started. There's two of them already putting out their own solo albums, coming out and putting them, which, and I'm thinking, and people have said to me, "Wonder where they got the idea for that." It's like, just go back and there's other people suddenly appearing who you haven't heard of for years, sort of doing gigs, and I thought I seem to have stirred the pot up. I didn't have, I had no intention of doing anything like this. Was just to stop me from going fucking mad,
Yeah.
but it stirred the pot, and there's people getting back out and doing stuff again because they're looking at it and saying, if that old fucker can do it, anybody can.
Well, thanks very much for your time, Gav. Really, really enjoyed this, man.
Thanks, mate.
And
Great to talk to you. Thanks. I
is there
could,
anything like that for a wrap up, or?
yeah, some Guinness.
Okay.
Thanks,
Excellent.
mate. I really appreciate it. And if we can do it again when every scar is out, I'll
Love
be
it.
really up for doing that.
Perfect, man. Thanks very much for your time, and enjoy the rest of your day.
And you. Thanks very much, son.
Best
Bye.
luck. Bye. Thank you for listening to that episode of Post-Burnout.com interviews. We're an independent venture run by yours truly, and as I said at the beginning, liking, rating, subscribing, and sharing really helps us out a lot. If you're feeling extra generous, we do have a PayPal donation link in the episode description, but don't feel obligated, of course. We've also begun releasing occasional exclusive episodes on Spotify, so subscribe there if you'd be interested in hearing those. Thanks again for listening, and see you next time.